bus lurched forward, and my eyes snapped open. I was sitting in the middle row, next to the window. Sweat was running down my neck. The air conditioning had died somewhere between the third stop and the fourth, and every passenger was fanning themselves with whatever they had handy. A woman in front of me was waving a folded newspaper like it might help. It was not helping. Outside the window, the city looked like it was melting. The asphalt on the road shimmered. A traffic light pole bent slightly in the heat, or maybe I was imagining it. 2 months of rain, the meteorologists had said. Then 2 days of blazing sunshine, and the temperature had shot past 42 degrees. 42 Celsius. That was over 107 Fahrenheit. People were saying the heat would break by the weekend. People were saying a lot of things. I pressed my forehead against the cool glass of the window and closed my eyes again. I needed to think. I needed to think about the fact that I had just remembered what it felt like to die. The thirst had been the worst part. Not the burning on my skin, not the way my lips cracked and bled every time I tried to speak. The thirst, the absolute, crushing need for water that nothing could satisfy. I remembered crawling across a floor that was hot enough to cook an egg. I remembered the ceiling above me, stained and cracked. I remembered thinking that if I could just get to the tap, if there was just one more drop of water left in the world, I would drink it. I would drink the whole ocean. And then I had opened my eyes, and I was sitting on the bus. My name is Zhang Xiaotao. I am 32 years old. I work in the 3rd floor of Building 7 at the Riverside Technology Park. And about 3 minutes ago, I died of dehydration in a world where the sun never set and the temperature never dropped below 60 degrees Celsius. But that had not happened yet. I knew that with a certainty that made my stomach lurch. The date on my phone said the 16th of July. I checked it again, pressing the screen like it might change if I stared hard enough. The 16th of July, 8:47 in the morning. The sky outside was brutal, but it was still morning. The sun was still climbing. 12 hours. I had 12 hours before the world caught fire. I stood up so fast that the bus swayed. The driver shouted something at me through the window. I did not hear him. I was already pushing past the man in the aisle seat, my bag bouncing against my hip. Someone swore at me. I did not care. I pulled the stop cord, and the bus groaned to a halt at the next corner. I jumped off into the heat. It hit me like a wall. The air was thick, and breathing it felt like swallowing fire. The sun was a white disk in a cloudless sky, and it did not feel like 8:47 in the morning. It felt like the middle of the afternoon on the surface of the sun. I stood on the sidewalk for exactly 3 seconds before I started running. I was not going to my apartment. I was not going to my parents' house in the suburbs. I was going to the Riverside Technology Park. I was going to Building 2 in the life I had just lived and died. Building 2 had been the home of a cold chain trading company. They had moved out 6 months before the world ended. The building had sat empty, just one of dozens of vacant properties in the industrial district. Nobody wanted it. The rent was too high. The location was too far from downtown, and the previous tenant had left behind a labyrinth of underground storage rooms that most people found confusing and inconvenient. I had found it convenient. Or at least, I had found it after everything else was gone. In my past life, I had broken into that building through a ground floor window on the third night after the sun stopped setting. The window had been painted shut, but I had hit it with a fire extinguisher until it cracked. I had climbed through into a dark office filled with empty desks and dead potted plants. I had heard the hum of a cooling system and followed it down a set of stairs and through a fire door and into the most beautiful thing I had ever seen in my life, a cold storage facility. The refrigeration units were still running on emergency power. The temperature in the main room was around 12 degrees Celsius. It was cold enough that I had wept when I walked in. Cold enough that I had thought, for one beautiful moment, that I might actually survive this. I had not survived it, but not because of the cold. I had told people about the shelter. I had been stupid enough, naive enough, desperate enough to think that sharing the location would make me a hero. I had walked into the company office 2 days after the power went out and told the handful of survivors huddled there about the cold storage facility. I had shown them the building. I had opened the door. Mao Bufan had been standing in the crowd that day. He was always standing in crowds, always at the front, always saying the right things. He had a face that was round and soft and always smiling. He reminded me of a pig dressed in a business suit. He had shaken my hand and called me a credit to the company. He had told me we would get through this together. 2 hours later, his men had dragged me out by my arms and thrown me into the street. The temperature outside was 67 degrees. I had screamed until my throat tore. I had begged. I had pressed my face against the glass door until my skin blistered, and they had just watched. They had watched, and they had not opened the door. The sun had not set, and the temperature had not dropped. And I had died alone on the concrete, outside a building that should have been mine. I was not going to make that mistake again. I caught a taxi at the corner. The driver had the air conditioning blasting. And even so, he looked like a man who had given up on life. His name plate said Mr. Chen. His shirt had a dark stain under each arm. Riverside Technology Park, I said as I climbed in. He looked at me in the rearview mirror. Lady, you picked a hell of a day to visit an industrial park. It's 58 degrees outside right now. 58. Building 2. Can you get me there in 20 minutes? For that money, I can get you there in 15. The taxi pulled into traffic, and I sat in the back seat with my hands clasped in my lap and my heart hammering against my ribs. I thought about calling my parents. I thought about calling anyone, but my phone felt like a dead weight in my pocket. I did not have time to explain. I did not have time to convince anyone of anything. In 12 hours, the sun was going to rise, and it was not going to set again for 60 days. I needed a shelter. I needed supplies, and I needed to make sure that nobody, and I meant nobody, ever found me when the world ended. The taxi dropped me at the main gate of the Riverside Technology Park at 9:09 in the morning. The guard at the gate gave me a lazy wave. He was sweating through his uniform. The thermometer on the guardhouse wall said 46 degrees in the shade. There was no shade. I walked through the gate and turned left toward the row of buildings at the far end of the complex. Building 2 was the last one, a squat 3-story structure with a gray concrete facade and barred windows on the ground floor. There was a faded sign above the main entrance that said King Yuan Cold Chain Trading. The company had moved out, but the sign had stayed. Nobody had bothered to take it down. The property management office was in Building 5, a mid-rise structure near the entrance. I walked through the heat as fast as I could without actually running. Running would draw attention. I walked like a woman who had a perfectly ordinary reason for being here on an ordinary workday morning. The property manager was a man named Lao Zhang. He was in his mid-50s, with a face that looked like it had been carved out of weather-beaten wood. He was sitting behind a desk with a desk fan pointed directly at his face. When I walked in, he looked at me with the expression of a man who had seen everything and was no longer impressed by any of it. Zhang Xiaotao, I said before he could ask. From Building 7. I need to talk to you about Building 2. He turned off the desk fan. It rattled and groaned and finally died. Building 2, he repeated. That old cold chain place. What about it? I sat down across from him. My shirt was soaked through. I did not care. Is it available to rent? Lao Zhang leaned back in his chair. The chair creaked. It's been empty for 6 months. We have had exactly 0 inquiries about it. What do you want with a cold storage building in the middle of a heat wave? A friend of mine is looking for warehouse space, I said. It was the lie I had rehearsed on the taxi ride over. A friend who runs a small supermarket. She needs somewhere to store inventory that does not require active refrigeration. Dry goods, canned products, that sort of thing. Building 2 has the space and the infrastructure. I told her I would check. Lao Zhang studied me for a long moment. He had small, sharp eyes that missed very little. Your friend wants to rent an entire building for dry goods storage. My friend is very cautious, I said. She believes in being prepared. Something in my voice must have reached him. Or maybe he was just desperate for the commission. Either way, he stood up and reached for his keys. Let me show you the place, he said. We walked through the industrial park in silence. The heat was a physical presence, pressing down on us from above and rising up from the ground at the same time. My shoes were hot through the soles. The concrete beneath my feet radiated heat like a stovetop. The air smelled like hot rubber and exhaust, and something else, something organic and rotten, coming from the drainage ditches along the road. I was sweating so much that I could feel it pooling in my shoes. But I was not thinking about the heat. I was thinking about the building and what was inside it, and what I needed to do in the next 11 hours and 45 minutes. Building 2 looked exactly as I remembered it. Gray concrete, barred windows, a metal roll-up door on the loading dock. The air around it felt fractionally cooler, or maybe that was my imagination. Lao Shang unlocked the main entrance and pushed the door open. The interior was exactly as I remembered too. A reception area with a long curved desk and empty shelves on the walls. Behind the reception area, an open floor plan with partitioned offices along the perimeter. The second floor was the same layout, just one floor up. And beneath all of it, accessible through a fire door at the back of the ground floor, was the basement. I followed Lao Shang through the fire door and down a set of concrete stairs. The air changed immediately. The oppressive weight of the heat lifted from my shoulders. At the bottom of the stairs, the temperature was probably around 14 degrees, cold enough to make me gasp. The basement was a large open space, maybe 200 square meters. The floors were concrete, slightly cracked, but solid. The walls were lined with industrial shelving units, most of them empty. A smaller room at the far end had heavy insulation around the door and was connected to a row of large commercial refrigeration units. I could hear the hum of the cooling system, powered by what I assumed was still the building's main electricity connection. This was the cold storage, Lao Shang said, gesturing at the insulated room. They kept the main chamber at around -18 for frozen goods. The smaller room here stayed around 4 degrees for fresh products. The whole system runs on the building's power grid. When King Yuan moved out, they left the units running. Didn't want to spoil the inventory they hadn't moved yet. I walked into the insulated room. The cold air hit my face like a blessing. The refrigeration units were old but solid. They were humming steadily. In a world without power, these would die within 48 hours. But in the first few days, these few days were all that mattered. The loading dock connects to the basement through a ramp. Lao Shang continued. They drove trucks right down to the cold storage. Very convenient for them. I walked back out of the insulated room and stood in the middle of the basement. The concrete was cool under my feet. The air was dry and clean, and it smelled like nothing at all, which was the most beautiful smell in the world after 2 months of breathing air that tasted like burning metal. This is perfect, I said. How much? Lao Shang told me the monthly rent. I did not flinch. In the world that was coming, money was going to stop meaning anything within a week. I need to rent it immediately, I said. Today. Can you arrange that, lady? The paperwork alone takes 3 days. I will pay 6 months in advance. Cash today. Lao Shang's expression did not change, but he uncrossed his arms. I can make some calls, he said. We went back to the property management office. I signed a contract for 6 months. I paid with my phone, transferring the funds from my personal account. And from the account my parents had just deposited money into, the account I had emptied to buy my survival in the world that had not arrived yet. 620,000 yuan total. Everything I had. Everything I was. Lao Shang counted the digital confirmation in his account twice. and then looked at me with something that might have been respect or might have been suspicion. "Your friend is very confident about her dry goods business," he said. "My friend has learned to plan ahead," I replied. "I had 11 hours. I needed to seal every window in that building until it was airtight. I needed to reinforce the main door and the fire doors and the loading dock. I needed to buy enough food and water to last for 60 days. I needed to set up cameras around the perimeter so I could see anyone approaching from a distance. I needed to charge every portable battery I could find. I needed to tell my parents to get to the mountains and stay there. I needed to make sure that when the sun stopped setting, I would be the only person in the world who was truly ready, and I needed to do it all without telling a single soul what was coming. "You know anyone who does welding?" I asked Lao Zhang. "Emergency job today." He looked at me for a long moment. The desk fan rattled in its housing. Outside, a car alarm was going off somewhere. The sound of the alarm was thin and desperate in the heat. "As a matter of fact," Lao Zhang said slowly, "I used to run a welding shop in my hometown before I moved to the city. Still have the equipment in storage. Can you seal the windows of building 2? All of them. Today. All of them. All of them. Steel bars across every opening. I want this building to be impenetrable." Lao Zhang stared at me. The suspicion in his eyes had deepened into something closer to concern. "Lady," he said, "what exactly is your friend planning to store in there?" "Something valuable," I said. "Something she cannot risk losing. And she needs it done today, not tomorrow. I will pay double your usual rate." He looked at the contract on his desk. 6 months of rent already paid. Then he looked at me. "Come on," he said. "Let me get my tools." He led me out of the property management office and across the compound to a storage shed behind Building 6. The shed was a corrugated metal structure that had been painted green once, many years ago, and was now the color of rust. Inside, Lao Zhang had a workbench, a MIG welder, an angle grinder, and a rack of steel bars and metal sheeting. I watched him load his equipment into a battered handcart. I counted the steel bars he was selecting. I did the math in my head. Building 2 had 6 windows on the ground floor, 4 on the second floor, and a skylight on the roof. If he sealed them all with steel bars, it would take most of the day. But it would be done before dark. "One more thing," I said. "The loading dock. The big metal door. Can you put a secondary lock on it?" "Something from the inside." Lao Zhang looked at me. The look on his face said that he knew something was very wrong, that I was not a supermarket supplier's friend, that this entire situation was strange and probably dangerous. But he did not ask. He just nodded. "I have a steel beam and a padlock mount in my shed," he said. "Give me 2 hours on the windows first. Then I'll do the dock." We worked through the morning. Lao Zhang welded steel bars across every window on the ground floor while I stood guard and watched the compound. The heat was relentless. By 11 in the morning, the temperature had hit 53 degrees. The metal bars Lao Zhang was handling were too hot to touch with bare hands. He wore heavy gloves and worked in short bursts, stepping back into the shade every few minutes. The air smelled like ozone and hot metal. Sweat dripped from Lao Zhang's face onto the concrete and evaporated immediately. He did not complain. He just kept working. I had paid him 32,000 yuan for the materials and labor. He was earning every cent of it. By early afternoon, every window on the ground floor was sealed. The steel bars were set into holes drilled in the concrete frame, then welded in place. Nothing was getting through those windows. Not a person, not a rock, not even a focused jet of water. I ran my hand along the bars and felt the heat of the metal and felt, for the first time since I had woken up on that bus, something that might have been hope. Then Lao Zhang went up to the second floor to seal those windows, and I went back to the property management office to make my phone calls. My parents lived in the mountains, about 2 hours outside the city. They had a small house near a river. In the world where I had died, they had survived. I knew this because I had called them on the second day, when the phones still worked, and my mother had told me that the river was still running cold, and that they had enough food in the garden to last for weeks. She had told me to come home. I had told her I was fine. I had not been fine, but they had been. I called my mother first. She answered on the second ring. Zhang Xiaotao, it's so hot here. We are fine, we are fine. Are you coming home for the weekend? Mom, listen to me. I need you and Dad to stay at the mountain house. Do not come into the city. Do not leave the house after dark. Fill every container you have with water. Every bucket, every pot, every bathtub. Fill them all, and buy as much food as you can carry. Canned food, rice, dried goods. Do not tell anyone why. There was a pause on the line. Zhang Xiaotao, you are scaring me. I am not trying to scare you. I am trying to keep you alive. Just do what I say. Please. Another pause. How long? I don't know, I said honestly. But stay where you are. The mountains will be cooler. The river will be your water source. You will be safe there. My mother was quiet for a long time. Then she said, Your father has been saying all week that something is wrong, that the heat is unnatural. He says the river is running warmer than he has ever felt it. Trust Dad, I said, and trust me. I will call you when it is safe. I hung up and immediately started making my supply lists. I had 10 hours left. I had 58,000 yuan remaining after paying the rent and Lao Zhang's wages. It was not enough for everything I wanted, but it was enough for everything I needed. I needed 100 bags of rice, 50 kilograms each. That would give me enough carbohydrates to survive for years if necessary. I needed 520-liter containers of purified water. At 1 liter of water per day, that would sustain me for 2 years. I needed canned food, seasonings, salt, soy sauce, cooking oil. I needed vitamins, because in a world without fresh fruit and vegetables, scurvy would kill me before dehydration did. I needed medicine, antibiotics, pain relievers, antihistamines, burn cream. I needed clothing, because in 60 days without laundry facilities, I would need to burn my clothes needed weapons, because in the world that was coming, the only thing standing between me and death was the thickness of my shelter walls. I started with the rice and the water. I walked to 3 different wholesale markets in the surrounding district, paying cash at each one, having the deliveries scheduled for early afternoon when most of the park's workers would be inside their air-conditioned offices, and not paying attention to a truck backing up to Building 2. At the first market, I bought 50 bags of rice. The shopkeeper was a heavy-set man with a mustache and a perpetual look of exhaustion. He looked at my order and then looked at me and asked if I was opening a restaurant. Something like that, I said. He shrugged and started loading the bags onto a handcart. 50 bags of rice, 50 kilograms each. It took 4 men to load them onto the delivery truck. At the second market, I bought the water. 520-liter containers. The shopkeeper here was a thin woman with reading glasses perched on the end of her nose. She asked me if I was preparing for a disaster. I am preparing for a party, I said with a smile that I did not feel. A very large party that is going to last a very long time. She laughed and gave me a discount for buying in bulk. I thanked her and made a mental note that in about 10 hours she would not be laughing. At the third market, I bought canned goods. Beans, corn, peas, mushrooms, bamboo shoots. I bought boxes of instant noodles, packets of dried noodles, bags of salt, bottles of soy sauce, containers of cooking oil. I bought packets of instant coffee and boxes of tea bags and several large jars of peanut butter, because in the world that was coming, protein would be worth more than gold, and peanut butter was protein. I bought vitamins, large quantities of multivitamins, vitamin C tablets, vitamin D supplements. I bought ibuprofen, amoxicillin, antihistamines, antacids, anti-diarrhea medication, and a bottle of hydrogen peroxide for wound cleaning. The pharmacy assistant looked at my list and raised an eyebrow. "Are you opening a clinic?" she asked. "Something like that," I said again. By the time I finished at the third market, it was 2:30 in the afternoon. The temperature was 58 degrees outside. I knew this because a digital sign outside a convenience store was displaying it in red LED numbers that glowed like dying coals. I was standing on the sidewalk outside the pharmacy, looking at the street, when I saw her. Wang Jiujiu was standing under the awning of a noodle shop about 20 meters away. She was looking at me. She was wearing the same blue blouse and black slacks she had been wearing on the bus, the one I had taken to get to the park this morning. Her hair was pulled back in a ponytail, and her face was pale, and her eyes were very wide. She was looking at me the way you look at a ghost. I looked back at her, and my heart stopped. In the life I had just left, Wang Jiujiu had been in the company office when I told everyone about the shelter. She had been standing at the back of the group, quiet and nervous, the way she always was. She had not said anything when Mao Bufan's men dragged me out. She had not helped me. She had not stopped them. She had just stood there with her hands pressed over her mouth and and her eyes full of tears. I had hated her for that. For 3 days in the shelter, dying of thirst, I had nursed that hatred like a flame. She had done nothing. She had let it happen, but I had also learned, in the hours before I died, that Wang Jiujiu had not survived anyway. On the 5th day after the apocalypse began, a mob had stormed the small convenience store at the edge of the park. Wang Jiujiu had been inside, trying to stop people from looting. She had put herself between a man with a crowbar and a shelf of bottled water. She had been knocked to the ground and trampled. The crowd had not stopped. The crowd had not even noticed. They had walked over her body like it was a puddle on the floor. I knew this because in my last hours, dying on the concrete outside Building 2, I had seen her body being carried out of the convenience store by 2 men who had stopped to drink the water she had died protecting. Now she was standing under a noodle shop awning, staring at me, and I knew. I walked toward her. She did not run. She just stood there, very still, with her hands clenched at her sides. "You're here," she said. Her voice was very quiet. "You are here, and you are buying supplies." And I thought I was the only one who remembered. I stopped 2 feet away from her. The heat was radiating from the pavement and the buildings on either side of us. Somewhere nearby, a dog was barking. The sound was hoarse and frantic. "You remember too," I said. It was not a question. Wang Jiujiu nodded. A single tear rolled down her cheek and evaporated almost immediately in the heat. "I died in the store," she said. "I was trying to stop them. The man with the crowbar, he just hit me and I fell. And then there were so many feet, and I could not breathe, and I thought, this is it. This is how it ends. And then you woke up, and then I woke up." She wiped her face with the back of her hand. "On the bus. Same bus you were on. I saw you get off at the 4th stop. I almost called out to you, but then I thought, wait, why is she getting off? And then I realized where we were going, and I thought, she knows. She knows too." I studied her face. I had known this woman for 3 years. We had shared cubicle walls and lunch breaks and birthday cakes in the break room. I had thought I knew her. But in my previous life, I had misjudged her just as I had misjudged everyone else. I had thought she was weak. She had been brave enough to die for strangers. "You should come with me," I said. Wang Jiujiu's eyes widened. "What? You should come with me. I have rented the cold chain building in the park, the basement shelter. I have supplies arriving in 2 hours. I have enough for 1 person. I need to know if I have enough for 2. She stared at me. "You would share the shelter with me. After what happened, you died trying to save people you did not even know," I said. "In my past life, I died because I trusted the wrong people. But you are not those people. And if you are telling the truth, if you really remember what is coming, then you deserve a chance to survive it." Wang Jiujiu was quiet for a moment. The sun beat down on us both. Across the street, a traffic light was flashing yellow, disabled by the heat. "I have things," she said finally. "I have been buying things since this morning. I woke up on the bus, and I got off and I started buying. I bought a diesel generator, a small one, portable. I bought 200 liters of diesel. I bought a van, a second-hand cargo van. I am picking it up this afternoon. I also bought cameras, 8 outdoor security cameras, and a DVR system, and 200 meters of cable. I stared at her. You bought a generator. I know electricity is going to fail. I know the power grid will collapse. But a diesel generator can charge batteries. It can run small equipment. It can keep the camera system running for months if I ration the fuel properly. She paused. I am an IT person. I know how to set up a surveillance network. I know how to make a small fuel supply last. I have been thinking about this all morning. You have been preparing. I have been preparing. I spent every yuan I had. I am broke. I am completely broke, but I am alive. I think she was right. She had done exactly what I would have done if I had thought of it first. The cameras were brilliant. I had been so focused on sealing the building that I had not thought about monitoring the perimeter. Without cameras, I would be blind. I would not know who was approaching until they were at the door. The shelter, I said. I have a man sealing the windows right now. Lao Shang from the property management office. He is good, very good, but he does not know what is really happening. I told him it was for a friend, and the basement, sealed and locked. The refrigeration units are still running. The temperature in the main storage room is around 12 degrees. The insulated inner room is even colder. Wang Jiujiu closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, they were wet again. 12 degrees, she whispered. 12 degrees would feel like heaven right now. It will feel even better when it is 65 outside, and the sun does not set, I said. Come on. We have 5 hours left. We need to get back to the park. We caught a taxi back to Riverside Technology Park. The driver was the same one who had brought me here this morning. He recognized me. Back again. You must really love this place. Work, I said. Always work. The park was quiet in the afternoon heat. Most of the office workers were at their desks, suffering through the afternoon slump under inadequate air conditioning. The sidewalks were empty. The trees along the main road were shedding leaves like it was autumn. The grass in the central courtyard had turned brown and brittle. Lao Shang was on the roof of Building 2 when we arrived, welding the final steel bars over the skylight. He was working with his shirt off, his back slick with sweat. The MIG welder crackled and spat. The smell of ozone mixed with the smell of hot tar from the roof surface. Wang Jiujiu looked at the building and then at me. You really did it, she said. You sealed the whole place. The windows are done, I said. Now we need to reinforce the main entrance and set up the cameras. Can you do the camera installation? I can do the camera installation. Give me 2 hours. I need to pick up the van first and drive it back here. The cameras will need to be positioned outside in the blind spots around the building. Where are the main approaches? Front entrance from the road, side entrance from the parking lot, loading dock at the back. Those are the 3 access points. I will put 2 cameras on each approach. Wide angle lenses. Night vision. They will run on the generator and store footage on the DVR in the basement. We will have a monitor down there. We will be able to see anyone coming from 100 meters away. She said it with such calm efficiency that I almost laughed. This woman had died being trampled by a mob while trying to protect a shelf of bottled water. And now she was talking about security camera placement like she was setting up a home office network. Lao Shang, I called up to the roof. One more job, the main entrance. I need a secondary lock, a heavy one. Something that can hold against a battering ram. Lao Shang poked his head over the edge of the roof. His face was red from the heat and streaked with sweat and grime. Lady, at this point, I am afraid to ask what you are building. A fortress, I said. Against the end of the world. He stared at me for a long moment. Then he laughed. It was a short, dry laugh, like the sound of something breaking. Against the end of the world, he repeated. Lady, if the end of the world is coming, there is not a lock in this city that will keep it out. You would be surprised, I said. Wang Jiujiu went to pick up the van. I went inside Building 2 to supervise the delivery of the supplies. The truck from the first wholesale market was already backing up to the loading dock. 4 men were unloading 50 bags of rice while I watched from the shade of the dock awning. Each bag was heavy enough that 2 men struggled to carry it. They stacked the bags along the basement wall in neat rows, 12 bags high, 5 bags deep. The water arrived next. 520-liter containers, each one a brilliant blue cylinder with a carrying handle. The delivery man was a wiry young guy with a shaved head and tattoos on his forearms. He looked at Building 2 and raised an eyebrow. Storing this much water in this heat, you going to open a swimming pool? Something like that, I said. For the 3rd time today, he loaded the containers into the basement. They filled one entire wall, rising from the floor in columns like blue bricks. 500 containers of water. 500 days of survival. I could survive for nearly a year and a half on this alone, even if I tripled my water consumption in the heat. The canned goods and dry goods arrived in the late afternoon, carried in by a succession of delivery workers who were all sweating profusely and making sarcastic comments about the weather. I stacked the supplies in the basement corner that I had designated as the food storage area. Canned beans, instant noodles, cooking oil, salt, soy sauce, peanut butter, tea bags, coffee, sugar, rice. Enough food for 2 people for a year if we rationed carefully. Lao Shang came down from the roof at 4:30 in the afternoon. His hands were blistered and his face was burned. But every window in Building 2 was sealed. The skylight was covered with steel plate, welded at the edges. The building was a bunker. Done, he said. He was breathing hard. Every window is sealed. The main entrance has a steel beam lock. The loading dock has a secondary bolt. The fire doors are reinforced. Lady, this building could survive an earthquake. It will need to survive more than an earthquake, I said. I handed him an envelope with the remaining payment. His wages plus a bonus for the emergency work. He opened the envelope, counted the bills, and looked at me with an expression I could not read. "You know something," he said. It was not a question. "I know that the next few days are going to be very hot," I said. "Hotter than today. I know that the power grid is going to fail. I know that water is going to stop running from the taps. And I know that everyone in this city who is not prepared is going to die." Lao Shang was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. "The river," he said. "The river in my hometown. It runs from the mountains. Clean water, cold water, all year round. You think I should go there?" "I think you should go there," I said. "Tonight. Take your family. Buy as much food as you can carry. Do not tell anyone where you are going. And do not come back until the weather changes." He looked at the envelope in his hand. Then he looked at the sealed building. Then he looked at me. "How long?" he asked. "I do not know," I said. "Maybe a month, maybe 2, but the mountains will be safer. The elevation will keep the temperature down, and the river will be your water supply." Lao Shang folded the envelope and put it in his shirt pocket. He did not say thank you. He just nodded once, very firmly, and walked out of building 2 into the blazing afternoon sun. I watched him go. I hoped he would make it. I hoped his family would make it. In 12 hours, I would be sealing myself into this building, and the rest of the world would be on its own. Wang Jiujiu returned at 5:45 in the new van. It was a white cargo vehicle, slightly dented on the passenger side, with a diesel engine and a large flatbed. She drove it directly to the loading dock and backed it up to the open bay. "I got everything," she said, climbing out of the cab. "The generator is in the back. 200 liters of diesel in 6 jerry cans. The camera system, cabling, connectors, DVR monitor, and a few other things I thought we might need." She started unloading. The generator was a compact diesel unit, about the size of a large suitcase, capable of producing enough power to charge batteries and run small equipment. She carried it into the basement and set it up in the corner near the refrigeration units. "The cameras will need to be installed outside," she said. "The lenses need to be positioned to cover the 3 approaches with no blind spots. I will need to go up on the roof to mount the cameras on the upper corners of the building. Can you help me run the cable?" We worked together for the next 2 hours. Wang Jiujiu climbed up and down a ladder, mounting cameras at 8 strategic positions around Building 2. I fed cable through conduit openings and sealed the gaps with duct tape and silicone sealant. The sun set behind the western skyline at 7:14 in the evening, but neither of us noticed because the sky was still bright. In my past life, I had not realized that the sun was not setting. I had gone to sleep in the company office on the first night and woken up at 3 in the morning to find the sky outside blazing with orange light. I had thought it was a fire. I had run to the window, and I had seen the sun, still directly overhead, still burning with the same fierce intensity it had held at noon. That had been the moment I understood that something fundamental had broken in the world. Now, standing on the roof of Building 2 with a cable in my hands and Wang Jiujiu beside me, I watched the sun descend toward the horizon. It was 6:58 in the evening. The temperature was still 51 degrees. The sky was a deep, washed-out blue, the color of old denim. Zhang Xiaotao, Wang Jiujiu said. Her voice was very quiet. Look at the time. I looked at my phone. 6:59, 7 o'clock, 7:15, 7:30. The sun was still above the horizon. It had not moved in 45 minutes. Wang Jiujiu sat down on the roof. Her face was pale in the orange light. It is not going to set, she whispered. No, I said, it is not. We sat there on the roof of Building 2 and watched the sun hang in the sky like a wound that would not stop bleeding. The orange light painted the concrete and the metal and our faces in the color of fire. The temperature was still 51 degrees. It had not dropped with the absence of sunlight because the sunlight had not actually dropped. It was 7:45 in the evening. The sun was still setting. The sun was still doing what it was supposed to do, but it was doing it so slowly that the change was invisible to the naked eye. In my past life, I had watched this for hours before I understood. I had gone to bed thinking the sun was merely slow to set. I had woken up in the middle of the night and looked out the window and seen the sun still there and thought I was dreaming. This time, I did not make that mistake. Come on, I said to Wang Jiujiu. We need to get inside. We climbed down from the roof. Wang Jiujiu locked the access hatch behind us. I went to the main entrance and slid the steel beam into its mount. The beam was heavy, cold, and solid. I turned the padlock and felt it click shut. The sound was the most beautiful thing I had ever heard. Wang Jiujiu connected the camera system. 8 screens lit up on the monitor in the basement, each one showing a different angle of the outside world. The front road, the parking lot, the loading dock, the roof access, the eastern wall, the western wall, the southern approach, the northern approach. 8 eyes watching the world in perfect silence. The refrigeration units hummed in the corner of the basement. The air was cool and dry, and it smelled like nothing at all. Wang Jiujiu had brought a small electric heater from her apartment, and she had plugged it in and turned it on, and was sitting in front of it with her hands stretched out toward the warmth. It is cold, she said, and laughed. And the sound of her laughing in the cool air of the basement was the most human sound I had heard all day. I brought out the portable stove I had bought that afternoon and set it on the floor. Wang Jiujiu had brought canned goods from her own apartment, and together we opened a can of vegetables and a can of meat, and cooked a simple stir-fry on the stove. The smell of the cooking food filled the basement with something that felt almost like normalcy. We ate sitting on the floor of the basement, backs against the wall of water containers, surrounded by the soft blue glow of the refrigeration units. Outside, the temperature was still above 50 degrees. Outside, the sun was still visible in the sky, frozen in its descent, refusing to complete the simple act of setting. We ate in silence. We did not talk about what was coming. We did not need to. We both knew. At 10:30 in the evening, my phone buzzed. An emergency alert from the city government. I read it on the screen and felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. Due to extreme weather conditions, multiple road surfaces have reached critical temperatures. Several major highways have reported asphalt melting and tire failures. Drivers are strongly advised to stay off the roads. Emergency services are stretched to capacity. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill. Wang Xiaotao read over my shoulder. She did not say anything. She just took another bite of her food and chewed it slowly and swallowed. I set the phone down. I looked at the 8 camera feeds on the monitor. The park was quiet. The roads were empty. The sun was still in the sky, lower now, but still visible, casting long shadows from the buildings that should not have been there in the middle of the night. Tomorrow, I said, the roads will be impassable. By tomorrow afternoon, the supermarkets will be out of water. By the day after, the power will start failing. And us? Wang Xiaotao asked. We wait, I said. We watch the cameras. We ration our supplies. And we do not open that door for anyone. Wang Xiaotao looked at the padlock on the main entrance. She looked at the steel beam and the reinforced door and the sealed windows. She looked at the basement full of food and water and the 8 screens showing the empty park. And if they find us anyway, she asked. I picked up one of the baseball bats I had bought that afternoon. It was solid aluminum, heavy in my hand. I leaned it against the wall within easy reach of where I was sitting. Then we defend what is ours, I said. This time, nobody takes this shelter from me. Outside, the sun was still in the sky. The temperature was still above 50 degrees. And somewhere in the city, millions of people were going to sleep tonight, thinking tomorrow would be cooler. Tomorrow, the world would catch fire, and I was going to watch it burn from the only safe place left. The first 3 days of the apocalypse were a lesson in how quickly a city could die. On the morning of the second day, I woke up at 6 in the basement and checked the camera feeds before I opened my eyes. The park was still quiet. The sun was already up, of course, because it had never gone down. It was a pale disk in a white sky, barely distinguishable from the glare of the heat shimmer rising from every surface. Wang Xiaotao was asleep on the folding cot she had brought from her apartment, curled up under a thin blanket with her face turned toward the refrigeration units. I watched her breathe for a moment. In the cool air of the basement, she looked peaceful. She looked like a woman who had survived something terrible and was still catching her breath. I turned on the monitor and checked all 8 feeds. The front road was empty. The parking lot was empty. The loading dock was empty. The park was a ghost town, every building sealed and dark, every window shuttered against a heat that had reached 57 degrees by 8 in the morning. My phone buzzed. Then it buzzed again. Then it did not stop buzzing. I picked it up and saw 47 unread messages in the company group chat. I scrolled through them quickly, scanning for information. Anyone know if the roads are clear? Highway 7 is completely blocked. Saw 3 cars on fire. My neighbor's air conditioner caught fire at 3 in the morning. The whole building is gone. Is anyone else noticing the sun is not setting? The sun is setting. You are just paranoid. The sun is not setting. I have been watching it for 6 hours. It has not moved. Stop panicking. It will set. It always sets. Always. You really believe that? Shut up, all of you. The power is out on the 4th floor. The generator is not working. We need to move to the parking garage. I put the phone down. The company group chat was full of people who were just beginning to understand what was happening. Some of them were still in denial. Some of them were already panicking. Most of them were somewhere in between, trying to maintain the fiction that this was temporary, that the power would come back on, that the sun would set, that everything would be fine. I knew better. I had lived through 3 days of this. I knew exactly how it was going to go. By noon, the temperature had hit 62 degrees. The asphalt in the parking lot had begun to soften. I could see it in the camera feeds, a slight warping of the surface, a black sheen where the tar was liquefying under the relentless sun. Within 48 hours, that parking lot would be impassable. Within a week, it would be a puddle. Wang Jiujiu woke up at 7:30. She came over to the monitor and looked at the feeds, and then looked at me. How bad? She asked. The sun has not set in 14 hours. Temperature hit 62 at noon. The roads are melting. She nodded slowly. She walked over to the food storage area and picked up a can of beans. She opened it with a hand can opener and ate it cold, straight from the can, standing in front of the refrigeration units with the cool air washing over her face. I used to hate eating cold food, she said between bites. Now, I think I could eat cold food every day for the rest of my life and be happy. Enjoy it while it lasts, I said. The refrigeration units will die in 48 hours when the power grid fails completely. After that, we will have to open the insulated room to use the cold air. Once we open it, the temperature inside will equalize with the basement within a few hours, so we need to decide which food to keep cold and which to keep at room temperature. We need to move everything we want to preserve into the insulated room and seal it before the power dies. The cold air will keep the food frozen for a few days, even without active refrigeration. After that, we will have to start eating it. Wang Jiujiu finished the beans and set the can down. How long did you survive in your past life? She asked. The question hung in the air between us. I did not want to answer it, but she had a right to know. 12 days, I said. 12 days, and I died of dehydration outside this building. In the street, in 67-degree heat. Wang Jiujiu was quiet for a long moment. Then she walked over to the wall of water containers and pressed her hand against the blue plastic. We have water, she said. We have food. We have a shelter that can survive a direct hit from a truck. We have cameras so we can see anyone coming. We have a generator and diesel for the cameras. And we have each other. Yes, I said, that is more than most people have. That is more than anyone has, I said. Most people have nothing. Most people are going to die. She looked at me. Then we survive, she said simply. And we feel guilty about it. And we do it anyway. I had not thought about guilt until she said that. But she was right. I knew I would feel it. I was already feeling it in a small way every time I looked at the monitors and saw the empty streets and thought about the people out there who did not know what was coming. But guilt was a luxury. It was a feeling I could not afford. The moment I let guilt make me open that door for someone, I would be dead. And so would Wang Jiujiu. We survive, I said, and we do not apologize for it. By the afternoon of the second day, the first refugees had arrived in the parking garage beneath Building 7. I could see them on the cameras, a trickle of people moving from the main building down the entrance ramp into the underground darkness. They carried bags and suitcases and boxes of water. They moved in clusters, small family groups, pairs, individuals. They looked up at the cameras as they passed, and I felt their eyes like insects crawling across my skin. Wang Jiujiu counted them. 43 people in the first 2 hours, she said. Families mostly, some elderly, some with children. More will come, I said. By evening, there were over 100 people in the parking garage. The camera feeds from the garage entrance showed them spreading out across the concrete floor, laying down blankets and mats, setting up makeshift camps between the parked cars. Children were crying. Someone had brought a portable stove and was trying to cook something, the smoke rising in a thin column that was immediately swallowed by the heat. On the third day, the water started running low in the parking garage. I knew this because I was watching the group chat again. The messages had become desperate, frantic, stripped of the polite fiction that this was temporary. People were arguing about water rationing. People were accusing each other of hoarding. People were offering money for water, then offering more money, then offering possessions, then offering things that could not be named in a text message. I read the messages in the basement of Building 2 while Wang Jiujiu organized our food supplies. The temperature in the basement was holding at 13 degrees. The refrigeration units were still running. Outside, the temperature had reached 65 degrees, the highest I had ever seen it. The air above the parking lot was shimmering so violently that the camera images occasionally distorted like a funhouse mirror. At 10 in the morning, the air conditioning in Building 7 failed completely. The generator in the parking garage was not powerful enough to run the central air system. It could only power emergency lights and charge a few phones. The people in the garage were trapped in a concrete box with no ventilation and no cooling, and the temperature inside was rising toward 50 degrees. Wang Jiujiu looked at the camera feed from the garage entrance, and her face went pale. "They are going to cook in there," she said. "Yes," I said. "We cannot help them." "No." She turned away from the monitor. She walked over to the insulated room and pressed her hand against the door. The metal was cold. The refrigeration unit inside was still running, still humming, still doing the one job it had been built to do. How long? She asked. How long before the power fails completely? Power grid failure is scheduled for tomorrow morning. They announced it on the news this morning. The grid can no longer sustain residential cooling. They are redirecting all available power to hospitals and emergency services. So tomorrow, the last refrigeration unit in this building goes silent. Tomorrow, everything goes silent. Wang Xiaotao nodded. She opened the insulated room and walked inside. I heard her moving things around, reorganizing the shelves. When she came out, her arms were full of frozen food. Then we have today, she said. Today, we move everything we need to preserve into the insulated room and seal it. Tomorrow, the cold will start to fade. We have maybe 3 days of viable cold storage after the units die. After that, we are eating room temperature food until it spoils. How long before it spoils without refrigeration? Canned goods are good for years. Dry goods are good indefinitely. Fresh food in the insulated room, maybe a week. After that, we stop eating fresh food. I nodded. This was the plan. This was the survival timeline. 3 days of cold storage. 1 week of fresh food. Then we were living on rice and canned goods, and whatever we could make last. It was not a comfortable life, but it was a life. And in the world outside these walls, a life was worth more than any amount of comfort. On the evening of the 3rd day, as the sun hung motionless in the sky like an accusation, my phone buzzed one more time. It was a message from an unknown number. I opened it and felt my stomach clench. Zhang Xiaotao. This is Mao Bufan. I know you are alive. I know you are in the park. I know you have supplies. You are going to share them with the company. That is not a request. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I showed it to Wang Xiaotao. She read it, and her face went very still. How does he know? She asked. He saw me, I said. On the day it started. I went to the property management office with Lao Zhang. Someone from the company must have seen me in the park. They told him, "What are you going to do?" I looked at the steel beam across the door. I looked at the padlock and the reinforced hinges and the sealed windows. I looked at the 8 camera feeds showing the empty approaches to Building 2. I am going to tell him the truth, I said. I typed my reply and sent it. You are right, Boss Mao. I am alive. I have supplies. And you are going to die out there in that parking garage. And I am not sharing a single drop of water with you. The reply came back in seconds. It was a string of obscenities that would have made a truck driver blush. Then, after the string of curses, you think you can survive alone. They will find you. They will break in. And when they do, I will be first through the door. I laughed. It was not a nice laugh. It was the laugh of a woman who had already died once and had no patience left for threats. I welded every window shut this morning, boss. I have enough water here to last a year. I have enough food for 2 people for 2 years. I have cameras watching every approach. and I have a baseball bat and a knife and a stun gun. Come and get me. I will be right here. I put the phone down. Wang Jiujiu was looking at me with an expression that was somewhere between admiration and horror. You just told him exactly where we are, she said. I told him exactly where we are, I agreed. And I told him exactly what we have. And I told him there is nothing he can do about it. That is going to make him angry. That is going to make him stupid, I said. Anger makes people stupid. And stupid people in 65-degree heat do not survive very long. I turned off my phone. I did not want to see any more messages from Mao Bufan. I did not want to think about him or the people in the parking garage or the city burning outside. I wanted to eat dinner and go to sleep and wake up tomorrow in this cool, quiet basement and pretend for a few more hours that the world was still the way it used to be. Wang Jiujiu made dinner that night. She opened 2 cans of vegetables and a packet of dried noodles and cooked them together in a large pot on the portable stove. The smell was ordinary and beautiful. We ate sitting on our cots, cross-legged, with the camera monitors glowing softly in the corner. On the screens, the parking garage of Building 7 was lit by emergency lights. I could see people moving around, spreading out blankets, trying to get comfortable on the concrete floor. A woman was breastfeeding a baby. An old man was sitting against a pillar with his eyes closed. 2 younger men were arguing about something near the entrance ramp, their gestures sharp and agitated. In 3 days, those 2 men would be dead. Most of the people in that garage would be dead. They would die of dehydration and heat stroke and violence and despair. They would die slowly, painfully, in the dark, and nobody would come to help them, and Mao Bufan would die with them, but not before he tried to take what was mine. On the morning of the 5th day, the power went out. I knew it was coming. I had been watching the news feeds on my phone as they became increasingly fragmented and desperate. The power grid was failing, 1 sector at a time, like a body shutting down organ by organ. First, the residential districts, then the commercial zones, then the industrial parks. At 6:47 in the morning, the refrigeration units in Building 2 went silent. Wang Jiujiu and I were both awake. We had been awake for an hour, sitting in the basement with the monitors on, watching the feeds from the parking garage. We heard the silence when it came. It was not dramatic. There was no sound of machinery stopping. The hum just was there, and then it was not. The basement temperature began to rise slowly, degree by degree. It was still cool when I checked it at 7 in the morning, maybe 15 degrees. But by noon, it had climbed to 22. By the evening of the 5th day, it was 28 degrees, which was still survivable, still comfortable compared to the outside. But it was no longer cold. The food in the insulated room would last another 3 days at this temperature. Maybe 4 if we were lucky, and the heat wave broke. But the heat wave was not going to break. The sun was still in the sky. The temperature outside was 67 degrees and climbing. Wang Jiujiu and I moved the most perishable items into the insulated room and sealed the door. Butter, cheese, milk, fresh meat from the small cold storage. We moved them quickly, efficiently, working in silence. The cold air from the insulated room was a shock against my skin when I opened the door. It lasted about 30 seconds, enough to feel the blessing of it, before the warmer basement air rushed in and diluted it. By noon on the 6th day, the insulated room had warmed to 10 degrees. The refrigeration unit inside was dead. The only cold left in the building was the memory of cold. On the 7th day, the water stopped. I knew it had stopped in the parking garage because I could see the people crowding around the bathroom fixtures in the camera feeds, turning the faucets again and again, staring at the dry pipes with expressions of dawning horror. The pipes were empty. The city water supply had finally given up, overwhelmed by the heat, the demand, the sheer impossibility of pumping water to a city that was being baked into the ground. In the basement of Building 2, we had 500 containers of water. We had enough to survive for over a year. And as I watched the people in the parking garage discover that the faucets had gone dry, I felt something twist in my chest that might have been guilt or might have been relief. Wang Jiujiu was watching the monitors too. She had not spoken in 20 minutes. Her face was expressionless. Her hands were still. How many? I asked. In the garage. 312. I counted this morning. Children, 7 that I have seen, and 2 infants. I closed my eyes. 7 children, 2 babies. I had seen the woman breastfeeding on the 3rd day. She was still in the garage. Her baby was still alive. For how long? I could not save them. I could not save anyone. I had known that from the moment I woke up on the bus. The shelter was for 2 people and no more. If I opened that door, we would all die together. The food would run out in days. The water would last weeks instead of years. And Mao Bufan would take everything and leave me in the street to die, exactly as he had before. I could not save them, but I could watch. In the late afternoon of the 7th day, Mao Bufan sent another message. This one was different. It was not angry. It was calm. It was the calm of a man who had run out of options. Zhang Xiaotao, I am offering you a deal. Come to the parking garage with 2 containers of water. Just 2. You give them to us, and I will forget about the shelter. I will tell everyone that you have nothing. You will be safe. You will be left alone. This is my offer. It is generous. I am not a generous man. Do not make me less generous. I read the message twice. Then I typed my reply. Boss Mao, I saw your post in the group chat this morning. The one offering Sun Jing to anyone who will give you water. I saw the photos you posted. I saw the way the other men were looking at her. You are not a generous man. You are a desperate man. And desperate men make bad deals. I am not coming to the garage. I am not giving you anything. And I am not afraid of you. There was a long pause. Then the reply came. You are going to regret this. I am going to find out where you are. I am going to come for you. And when I get there, I am going to make you suffer. I am going to make you scream, and no one will hear you. I put the phone down. I picked up the baseball bat that was leaning against the wall beside my cot. I weighed it in my hands. It was heavy and solid, and the grip was worn smooth from use. Come and try, Boss Mao, I said to the empty basement. I have been waiting for you. Wang Jiujiu looked at me from her cot. You are enjoying this, she said. No, I said. I am not enjoying it, but I am not afraid of it either. I have already died once. There is nothing he can do to me that is worse than what I already survived. The first attack came that evening. I saw them on the cameras at 7:14 in the evening. 3 men moving along the western wall of Building 2, staying close to the shadow of the building where the temperature was fractionally lower. They were carrying a heavy steel pipe between them, like a battering ram. They were moving slowly, laboriously, like men who had not eaten or slept in 2 days. Wang Jiujiu spotted them first. She was sitting at the monitor when she sat up sharply and pointed at screen 4, the feed from the western wall camera. Someone is coming, she said. I looked at the screen. The 3 men were halfway along the wall. They were sweating profusely, their shirts dark with moisture. One of them was supporting another who was limping badly, his left leg dragging behind him as though the joint had locked up. Heat stroke, Wang Jiujiu said, reading my expression. His leg. That is heat exhaustion. His body is shutting down. I watched the 3 men reach the main entrance of Building 2. They stopped in front of the steel door and stared at it. The door was featureless, unpainted, cold. It looked like what it was, an impenetrable barrier between them and everything they needed to survive. One of the men raised the steel pipe. He swung it at the door. The impact echoed through the basement like a gunshot. Bam, bam, bam. Each blow reverberated through the concrete walls, a deep, resonant boom that I felt in my chest. Wang Jiujiu and I stood in the basement and listened. The door did not move. The frame did not buckle. The steel bars were set 3 inches deep in the concrete and welded along every edge. That door could withstand a direct hit from a truck. A man with a steel pipe was not going to make a scratch on it. The men hit the door for 10 minutes. Then one of them sat down on the ground and put his head in his hands. The heat had won. They were dehydrated and exhausted, and they did not have the strength to break through a door that had been designed to withstand exactly this kind of assault. After a while, the man with the steel pipe sat down too. The 3 of them huddled in the thin strip of shade along the building wall, leaning against the concrete, too weak to move. The sun was still in the sky, a pale disk in a bleached white sky, and the temperature was still above 60 degrees, and they were slowly cooking to death in front of a door they could not open. One of them tried to use a hand drill to cut through the hinges. He got 3 holes into the top hinge before the drill bit snapped off. Then he tried the angle grinder Wang Jiujiu had seen them carrying. He got the blade onto the metal and pulled the starter cord, and the grinder screamed to life, and then died. because the car battery they had connected it to was too weak to power it. Wang Jiujiu watched the whole thing on the monitors. She was chewing her thumbnail, her jaw tight. "They are not going to make it," she said quietly. "No," I agreed. "They are going to die out there." "Yes." She was quiet for a long time. On the monitor, the man with the drill was slumped against the wall. His chest was heaving. His lips were cracked and bleeding. "We should let them in," she said. "No, they are going to die. They are going to die whether we let them in or not. If we open that door, 3 becomes 5, becomes 10, becomes 50. The shelter has enough supplies for 2 people for 2 years. If we let in 3 strangers with no supplies and no plan, we cut that time in half. Then we cut it in half again. And then we are dead. All of us. Just like before." Wang Jiujiu looked at the monitor. On the screen, the man with the drill was trying to get up. He made it to his knees. Then he made it to his feet. He stood swaying for a moment, looking at the door, and then he took 1 step toward it, and his legs gave out, and he fell. The other 2 men watched him fall. They did not help him up. They did not have the strength to help him. They just watched, with the dull, empty expressions of men who had already accepted what was coming. "He was a good man," Wang Jiujiu said quietly. "The one with the drill. He was one of the junior developers in Building 7. His name was Liu Wei. He sat 3 desks away from me. I did not say anything. I watched the monitor. After a while, the other 2 men left. They walked away slowly, their bodies bent under the weight of the heat, their footsteps slow and shuffling. They left Liu Wei where he had fallen. Liu Wei did not move. On the monitor, I could see his chest rising and falling in short, shallow breaths. He was still alive, but he was not going to last much longer. Wang Jiujiu reached for the door handle. "Do not," I said. She stopped. She looked at me. Her eyes were wet. "He is going to die. He is going to die whether we open the door or not. And if we open it, we die too. That is the world now. That is the choice. His life or ours." She let go of the handle. She sat back down on her cot and put her face in her hands. I heard her crying, soft and quiet, the sound muffled by her palms. On the monitor, Liu Wei was still breathing. But he was breathing slower now, slower and shallower. The heat was taking him the way it took everyone who was not prepared. It was patient, and it was thorough, and it did not care how good a person you were or how much you wanted to live. By midnight, Liu Wei had stopped moving. On the monitor, he was just a shape on the concrete, a dark, irregular patch along the base of the wall. I could not tell if he was alive or dead from the camera angle. I did not want to zoom in to find out. Wang Jiujiu had stopped crying. She was sitting at the monitor with her knees drawn up to her chest, watching the feeds with a blank, hollow expression. On screen 3, the western approach was empty. On screen 4, Liu Wei was a dark shape in the shadows. "Zhang Xiaotao," she said quietly. "Yes, this is what you went through in your past life. This is what it felt like." "Not exactly," I said. "In my past life, I was the one on the other side of the door. She nodded slowly. She did not say anything else. We sat there together in the cool air of the basement, surrounded by our food and our water and our weapons, and we watched the night pass by on the monitors. The night that was not a night. The endless, merciless day that stretched on and showed no sign of ever ending. On the morning of the 8th day, I woke up to find Mao Bufan standing in front of my camera. He was alone. He was standing in the parking lot in front of Building 2, directly beneath the camera on the northwest corner. The sun was blazing behind him, and his shadow stretched across the asphalt like a dark pool of spilled oil. He was holding a cell phone. He was looking directly into the camera lens. "Zhang Xiaotao," he said. His voice was thin and hoarse, barely above a whisper, but the camera had a microphone, and I could hear every word. "I know you are watching. I know you can see me." I leaned forward in my chair. "You think you are so clever," he continued. His voice was cracking. He was badly dehydrated. His face was gaunt, his eyes sunken, his lips split and bleeding. "You think you are so smart. You found a shelter. You stocked up on supplies. You think you are going to survive." He coughed. It was a deep, rattling cough that bent him double. When he straightened up, there was blood on his lips. "I am going to get you out of there," he said. "I am going to tear that building apart brick by brick. I am going to drag you out into the sun, and I am going to watch you burn. I am going to enjoy it. I am going to stand right here in this parking lot, and I am going to watch the life go out of your eyes." He smiled. It was the worst smile I had ever seen. It was the smile of a man who had lost everything and had nothing left but the need to make someone else suffer as much as he was suffering. "You hear me, Zhang Xiaotao. You are going to die in there, just like everyone else, just like Liu Wei. He is dead, by the way. I saw him this morning. He is dead, and you did nothing. You just sat in your air-conditioned hole and watched him die. You are a monster. You are worse than me." He ended the recording. The camera feed returned to the empty parking lot. I sat in my chair and stared at the monitor for a long time. Wang Jiujiu was standing behind me. She had heard everything. "He is not wrong," she said quietly. "No," I said. "He is not wrong. I did watch Liu Wei die. I did nothing. I am a monster. You are a survivor. There is no difference. Not anymore." I picked up my phone and typed a message to Mao Bufan. "You are right, boss. I watched Liu Wei die. I could have opened the door and saved him and then died myself 2 weeks later. But I chose to live. You can call me a monster if it helps you feel better. But you are the one standing in 67-degree heat with no water and no shelter. I am the one with enough water to last a year. So go ahead. Call me a monster. It will be the last thing you ever say." I sent the message. I did not wait for a reply. For the rest of the morning, Mao Bufan sent men to attack Building 2. They came in waves, small groups of 2 or 3, driven by promises of water and shelter that Mao Bufan could not deliver. They threw rocks at the sealed windows. They tried to pry the steel bars with crowbars. They tried to break through the main door with hammers and drills and their bare hands. None of it worked. The steel bars held. The door held. The building held. And one by one, the attackers collapsed in the heat. Some of them made it back to the parking garage. Most of them did not. I watched a man try to walk back to the garage and fall after 30 meters. He lay on the asphalt for 5 minutes, trying to get up, and then he stopped moving. Wang Jiujiu counted the bodies. By the end of the day, there were 6 new shapes along the walls of Building 2. 6 people who had come to take what was mine and had died in the attempt. That evening, Mao Bufan sent another message. This one was not a threat. It was a plea. Xiaotao, please, I am begging you. Send water. Just 1 container. I will do anything. I will give you everything I have. I will tell everyone that you are a hero. I will say that you saved the company. Just send water. I am dying. Please. I read the message, and I felt nothing. I had expected to feel satisfaction. I had expected to feel triumph. Instead, I felt only a vast, empty tiredness, like a hole had been burned in my chest, and everything inside it had turned to ash. Wang Jiujiu read the message over my shoulder. Are you going to respond? She asked. No, I said. He is not going to die tonight. He is too stubborn to die. And if I respond, he will know that I am still watching. Let him wonder. That night, I dreamed about Liu Wei. In the dream, he was standing in front of the sealed door, knocking politely, and I was sitting in the basement with my hands over my ears, refusing to hear him. He knocked for hours. He knocked for days. And then he stopped knocking. And then there was silence. I woke up in the dark. There was no dark, of course. The sun was still in the sky. But the basement felt dark, felt quiet, and Wang Jiujiu was sleeping peacefully on her cot, with her face turned toward the wall of water containers. On the monitor, the 6 bodies along the walls of Building 2 had not moved. They lay where they had fallen, dark shapes in the shadows, slowly being consumed by the heat. I lay back down and closed my eyes. I did not sleep again for a long time. On the morning of the 9th day, the survivors in the parking garage turned on Mao Bufan. I watched it happen on the cameras. Wang Jiujiu and I were eating breakfast, cold beans straight from the can, when the feeds from the garage entrance erupted into chaos. People were shouting. People were running. People were grabbing things and swinging them at other people. It started, as these things always do, over water. Or the absence of it. Someone had found Mao Bufan's secret stash. 3 containers of water, hidden in the trunk of his car in the parking garage. He had been hoarding water while telling everyone there was none left. He had been watching people die of thirst while he had water hidden away. The discovery ignited something in the garage. 9 days of heat and fear and desperation and hunger, all compressed into a single moment of fury. The people who had trusted Mao Bufan, who had followed him into the garage, who had believed his promises of order and organization, turned on him with a violence that had been building since the first day. I watched on the monitor as a crowd of people surrounded Mao Bufan near the entrance ramp. He was backing away, his hands raised, his face twisted with fear. He was shouting something, but I could not hear the words over the noise of the crowd. I could see his mouth moving, forming words that no one was listening to. Then someone hit him. A woman, middle-aged, wild-eyed. She hit him with a metal water bottle across the side of the head. He went down. The crowd jumped on him. Wang Jiujiu turned away from the monitor. She covered her face with her hands. "I cannot watch this," she said. I watched. I had earned this. On the screen, the crowd was pulling Mao Bufan apart. Not literally, but in every way that mattered. They were dragging him across the concrete floor by his arms and his legs. They were hitting him and kicking him and spitting on him. Someone had found a piece of rebar and was beating him with it. Mao Bufan was screaming. The sound was thin and high, almost a shriek, cutting through the noise of the crowd. He was begging. I could see his mouth forming the words. Please, please, please. The same words I had begged with, lying on the hot concrete outside this building in my past life. The crowd dragged him to the entrance ramp. The ramp that led up to the street. The ramp that led out into the killing heat. They threw him into the sun. Mao Bufan lay on the asphalt at the top of the ramp, blinking in the fierce light. For a moment, he did not move. He just lay there, his chest heaving, his face a mask of blood and shock. Then he tried to get up. He got one knee under him. He tried to crawl back into the shade of the garage. Someone kicked him. He fell back. Someone else threw a rock at him. It hit him on the shoulder. He rolled over and looked at the crowd with an expression of pure incomprehension. He could not believe this was happening. He could not believe that the people he had led, the people he had controlled, the people he had fed with promises and lies, were doing this to him. Then the crowd retreated. They backed away from the entrance ramp and left Mao Bufan lying in the sun. They were not killers. They were not executioners. They were just people who had been pushed past the point of reason, pushed past the point of mercy, pushed to the very edge of what a human being could endure. Mao Bufan was still alive. He was crawling. He was dragging himself across the asphalt toward the garage entrance, one agonizing inch at a time. His right leg was bent at a wrong angle. They had broken it when they dragged him out. He left a dark smear of blood on the hot pavement behind him. He made it to the shade at the top of the ramp. He rested there for a moment, his chest heaving, his face streaming with sweat and blood. Then he tried to go further. He tried to drag himself back into the garage. Someone stepped out of the crowd. It was a man I recognized, one of the junior accountants from the 4th floor. He was holding a fire extinguisher. He looked at Mao Bufan on the ground. He looked at the fire extinguisher in his hands. Then he looked at the crowd behind him. The crowd was silent. The man set the fire extinguisher down. He walked back into the garage. He did not want to do it. None of them wanted to do it. But no one stepped forward to help Mao Bufan. No one walked to the top of the ramp and offered him a hand. Mao Bufan lay in the shade at the top of the entrance ramp, and he waited. He waited for someone to come and help him. He waited for someone to change their mind. He waited for the mercy that he had never shown anyone else. The sun moved across the sky. The temperature rose. The minutes passed, and then, very slowly, Mao Bufan stopped moving. I watched his chest rise and fall, slower and slower, until it stopped altogether. He died at 2:17 in the afternoon. He died in the shade, 3 meters from the garage entrance, 3 meters from the people he had tried to rule, 3 meters from a world he had made everyone suffer in. Wang Jiujiu had turned back to the monitor. She was watching too. Her face was pale and still. "Is he dead?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "He is dead." She nodded slowly. She sat down on her cot and put her head in her hands. She did not cry. She did not say anything. She just sat there, very quietly, and breathed. I looked at the monitor. On the screen, the crowd had dispersed. People were walking back into the garage, slowly, in small groups, like survivors of a shipwreck returning to shore. No one was looking at Mao Bufan's body. No one was talking about him. He was already becoming a memory, already fading into the background of a world full of worse things. I thought about the moment I had opened the door for him in my past life. I thought about the way he had smiled and called me a credit to the company. I thought about the way his men had dragged me out by my arms and thrown me into the street. I thought about the door closing behind them and the lock clicking shut and the sound of my own screaming. And now he was dead, and I was alive, and I felt no satisfaction. I felt no triumph. I felt nothing at all except a vast, heavy exhaustion, like a stone had been placed on my chest, and I could not shift it. "Is it over?" Wang Jiujiu asked. I looked at the monitor. The garage was quiet. Mao Bufan's body lay motionless at the top of the ramp. The crowd was inside, tending to their wounded, rationing their last supplies, trying to figure out how to survive the next 50 days. "It is over for him," I said. "For us, it is just beginning." Wang Jiujiu nodded. She stood up and walked to the food storage area. She picked up a can of vegetables and opened it. She handed it to me. "Eat," she said. "You need to keep your strength up." I took the can. I ate. The vegetables were cold and tasted faintly of metal from the can. They were the most satisfying food I had ever eaten. Outside, the sun continued its slow crawl across the sky. The temperature continued to rise. And somewhere in the city, 1 million people were still fighting to survive. But in the basement of Building 2, 2 women sat in the cool air and ate canned vegetables and watched the monitors and waited for the world to end. It was not over yet. But for us, at least, it was just beginning to feel survivable. The days that followed the death of Mao Bufan settled into a rhythm that was almost peaceful. Every morning, I woke up at the same time. 6 in the morning, before the full force of the heat had built up. I checked all 8 camera feeds and noted any changes. Bodies had stopped appearing along the walls. The attacks had ended. Mao Bufan's death had sent a message that the survivors in the parking garage were not interested in repeating. Every morning, Wang Jiujiu made breakfast. She had become unexpectedly good at rationing our supplies, dividing everything into daily portions with the precision of a pharmacist. Rice measured to the gram. Water measured to the milliliter. Canned goods distributed evenly across the two of us. She kept a notebook, a small cloth-bound thing she had pulled from her bag, and she wrote down every item we consumed every day so we could track exactly how long our supplies would last. By the end of the second week, the temperature outside had stabilized at 68 degrees. It was the new normal. The roads had liquefied completely. The cars that had been abandoned on the streets had sunk into the melting asphalt and were now little more than dark shapes protruding from a black sludge that looked like cooled lava. The trees were dead. The grass was dead. The air smelled like burning rubber and hot metal, and something organic and sweet that I did not want to identify. The power was gone. The water was gone. The phones had stopped working on day 12. The last message I received was from my mother, sent at 3 in the morning when the satellite connection was briefly restored. It said only, "We are safe. The river is still running. We love you. Stay alive." I had replied, "I love you both. I will call when I can." I had not been able to call since the refrigeration units had died on the 5th day. The insulated room had warmed to ambient temperature by the 10th day. Our fresh food was gone by the 12th. We were now living on rice, canned goods, dried noodles, and peanut butter. It was monotonous, but it was enough. We were alive. The people in the parking garage were dying slowly. I watched them on the cameras every day, tracking the decline with a clinical detachment that scared me a little. The first week after Mao Bufan's death, there had been a kind of order. The survivors had organized themselves into groups, pooling whatever resources remained, distributing water in careful, negotiated increments. By the second week, that order had broken down. Fights broke out over food. People stole from each other. The strong took from the weak. I watched a young man shove an elderly woman to the ground and take the container of water from her hands. I watched the woman lie on the concrete and not get up. By the third week, the garage was nearly empty. The survivors had dispersed, some fleeing into the city in search of other shelters, some dying where they lay. I counted the remaining bodies on the cameras. There were 43 on day 21, 31 on day 25, 18 on day 30. On day 35, I saw something that made my breath catch. A woman was walking through the parking lot. She was carrying a child on her back. The child was small, maybe 2 or 3 years old. They were moving along the wall of Building 2, staying in the thin strip of shade cast by the building's overhang. The woman was barefoot. Her feet were blackened and cracked, burned by the asphalt she had walked on. She was carrying a small bag over her shoulder. Inside the bag, I could see a water container. Wang Jiujiu saw her too. She came to stand beside me at the monitor. We watched together as the woman reached the loading dock and stopped. She looked at the sealed door, at the reinforced lock, at the steel beam. Then she looked up, directly at the camera on the northwest corner. Directly at us, she raised one hand. It was a small, tired gesture, a wave, a plea. Wang Jiujiu put her hand on the door handle. She looked at me. We cannot, I said. She has a child. We cannot. She is dying. She is dying whether we open the door or not. If we open it for her, we open it for everyone. The next person will have 2 children. The one after that will have 5. And then we are dead. All of us. Just like before. Wang Jiujiu was crying again. She cried more than I did. I had used up all my tears in my past life. There was nothing left. The woman at the loading dock stood for 5 more minutes. She looked at the door. She looked at the camera. She raised her hand again. Then she turned and walked away, her child still strapped to her back, her footsteps slow and shuffling. I watched her go until she disappeared around the corner of Building 3. I did not know if she survived. I did not know if the child survived. I hoped they did. I hoped they found somewhere safe, but I knew they had not found it here. By the 40th day, the temperature had reached 71 degrees. It was the highest I had ever seen it. The air outside was a physical force, a pressure against the walls of Building 2 that I could almost feel through the concrete. The asphalt in the parking lot had stopped melting and had begun to harden into a black glass-like surface. The cars were half submerged in it, their roofs barely visible above the surface. The 8 camera feeds showed a world that was still and silent and dead. No movement on any of the approaches. No people in the parking lot. No sounds except the hum of the generator that Wang Jiujiu ran for 1 hour every evening to charge our remaining batteries, and the soft, constant drone of the fans we had set up to keep the basement air circulating. We were managing, we were surviving, we were alive. On day 45, I woke up and looked at the monitor and felt something that I had not felt in weeks. Hope. It was not a dramatic change. There was no announcement, no news broadcast, no sign from the heavens. It was just a feeling, a subtle shift in the quality of the light on the camera feeds. The sun looked different. It was lower in the sky. It had moved. Wang Jiujiu noticed it too. She woke up and looked at the monitor and said, very quietly, "It is shifting." I checked the time on the camera timestamps. Day 45, 6:30 in the morning. The sun was lower, significantly lower. In 45 days of constant daylight, the sun had finally begun to descend toward the horizon. It is not over yet, I said. The temperature will take weeks to drop. The damage is done. The infrastructure is destroyed. We will still be living in this basement for months, but it is changing, Wang Jiujiu said. Her voice was trembling. It is actually changing. She was right. It was changing. The sun was setting. It was slow, agonizingly slow, but it was happening. The world was slowly, tentatively, beginning to return to normal. On day 50, the sun set completely for the first time in 50 days. It sank below the horizon at 6:42 in the evening, and for the first time in 50 days, the sky turned dark. The temperature dropped. By midnight, it was 53 degrees. By dawn, it was 48. On day 55, it rained for the first time. A brief, fierce downpour that lasted 20 minutes and left the streets steaming. Wang Jiujiu and I stood at the loading dock and watched the rain fall from a sky that was still pale and washed out, but was no longer a flat, burning white. The rain was warm, but it was rain, and it was falling from the sky, and it was the most beautiful thing either of us had ever seen. On day 60, the sky was overcast. The sun was hidden behind a thick layer of clouds. The temperature was 41 degrees. People began to emerge from the parking garage. I watched them on the cameras. They walked out of the garage entrance in small groups, blinking in the gray light, holding their hands up to shield their eyes from brightness they had not seen in 2 months. Some of them were crying. Some of them were laughing. Some of them just stood there, looking at the sky, looking at the clouds, looking at the world they had survived. There were 9 of them. 9 people out of the 312 who had huddled in the parking garage on the second day. 9 people who had survived. 9 people out of 300. Wang Jiujiu counted them twice. Then she sat down on her cot and put her head in her hands and cried. She cried for a long time. She cried for the people who had died. She cried for the people who had survived. She cried for herself, and for me, and for Liu Wei, and for the woman with the child, and for everyone who had walked past our walls and not been able to come in. I let her cry. Then I put my hand on her shoulder. "Come on," I said. "It is time to go home." We spent the day preparing. We packed what remained of our supplies into the van Wang Jiujiu had bought. We loaded the food, the water, the medicine, the generators. We took the cameras and the DVR and the batteries. We left the baseball bats and the knives. We did not need them anymore. At 4 in the afternoon, we opened the main entrance for the first time in 60 days. The air outside was hot, but bearable. 41 degrees. Survivable. The parking lot was covered in a layer of fine gray ash that had settled over everything during the long days of the heat wave. My footprints left dark impressions in the ash as I walked to the van. Wang Jiujiu started the engine. It coughed and sputtered and then caught. The diesel was still good. The van was still drivable. We backed out of the loading dock and drove through the parking lot, past the dark shapes of abandoned cars, half submerged in the hardened asphalt, past the walls of Building 2, where Liu Wei and the other attackers had died, past the entrance to the parking garage, where Mao Bufan's body had lain in the sun. I looked back at Building 2 through the rear window of the van. The gray concrete structure looked exactly as it had on the day I had rented it. Sealed, quiet, impenetrable. A bunker, a fortress, a tomb. "Thank you," I said to the building. for keeping us alive. Wang Jiujiu drove out of the Riverside Technology Park and onto the highway. The road was a mess, cracked and buckled, but it was passable. We drove slowly, picking our way through the debris, past the burned-out hulks of cars and the dark shapes of buildings that had been gutted by fires during the blackout. The city was unrecognizable. It looked like a war zone. Buildings had collapsed. Streets had buckled. The parks were fields of brown, dead grass and blackened tree trunks. The river that ran through the city center was a thin trickle of brown water, barely a stream, but people were out. Not many, but some. A family walking along the roadside, carrying bags. 2 men on bicycles, pedaling slowly through the debris. A woman sitting on the steps of a building, staring at nothing, her face blank with shock. We drove for 2 hours before we reached the mountains. The air changed as we climbed. It became cooler, cleaner, less thick, with the smell of ash and burning. The trees here were still green. The river that ran alongside the road was clear and cold, exactly as I remembered. My parents' house was at the end of a narrow road that wound through a forest of pine trees. The house was small and stone and had a red tile roof. It looked exactly the same as it had 60 days ago. It had survived. My mother was standing on the porch when we drove up. She was thinner than I remembered, her face more lined, her hair more gray. But she was standing, and she was alive. And when she saw me get out of the van, she ran down the porch steps and threw her arms around me and held on like she would never let go. My father came out a moment later. He did not run. He walked slowly down the steps, his face composed and steady. And when he reached me, he put one hand on my shoulder and held it there for a long moment. "You came back," he said. "I came back," I said. My mother was crying into my shoulder. My father had his hand on my shoulder. And behind me, Wang Jiujiu was standing beside the van, with tears streaming down her face, watching our reunion with an expression of such naked longing that I reached out and took her hand and pulled her into the embrace. "You are coming in too," I said. "You are family now." She did not argue. She just leaned into me and let herself be held. We spent that evening on the porch of my parents' house, eating a meal of rice and vegetables from the garden and drinking clean, cold water from the river. The sun set behind the mountains at 6:30. The sky turned orange and pink and purple, the colors of a sunset I had not seen in 60 days. Wang Jiujiu sat beside me on the porch steps. She had a glass of water in her hands. She was looking at the sunset with an expression of pure, unguarded wonder. "I thought I would never see this again," she said. "I thought the sun would just keep going forever. I thought it would never set." "It almost did," I said, "but it did not. It set. And now it is setting again. And tomorrow it will set again. And the day after that." "Yes." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "What happens now?" I looked at the sunset. I looked at my parents' house and the garden and the river and the mountains beyond. I looked at Wang Jiujiu beside me, her face gilded by the fading light, and I thought about the 60 days we had spent in the basement of Building 2, surviving. Now, I said, we rebuild. It would take months. It would take years. The city was in ruins. The infrastructure was destroyed. Millions of people were dead. The world that had existed before the heat wave was gone and would never come back, but there were people who had survived. There were people who had learned to adapt, to prepare, to fight for their own survival. There were people who understood now that the world could change in an instant, and that the only real security was the security you built yourself. My mother brought out more food. My father poured more water. Wang Jiujiu laughed at something my mother said. The sunset deepened into purple, and then into the soft, dark blue of early evening. The stars came out. The first stars I had seen in 60 days. I lay back on the porch steps and looked up at them. There were so many, more than I remembered. The sky was clear and deep and infinite, and the stars were bright and cold and ancient, and they had been there all along, hidden behind the sun. Wang Jiujiu lay down beside me. She was still holding her glass of water. Xiaotao, she said. Yes, thank you for opening the door. I turned my head and looked at her. Her face was serious. You saved my life, she continued. You did not have to. In your past life, I did nothing to help you. I stood there and watched them throw you out. And you still let me in. You died too, I said. In my past life, you died trying to stop people from looting the store. You were brave. You were good. You deserved to live. So did Liu Wei. The name hung in the air between us. I thought about him. The man with the drill. The junior developer who had sat 3 desks away from Jiujiu. The man who had tried to break into our shelter and had died on the concrete outside. So did Liu Wei, I agreed. And the woman with the child, and everyone else who came to our door and walked away. They all deserve to live. But the world does not give us what we deserve. It gives us what we can survive. And we survived. Wang Jiujiu was quiet for a long time. Then she said, I will never forgive myself for that, for watching them die, for not opening the door. I know, I said. I will never forgive myself either. But we are alive, and we have to find a way to live with that. She nodded. She put her hand over mine on the porch step. Her fingers were cold from the glass. I think about it every day, she said. Every single day. I think about Liu Wei on the concrete. I think about the woman with the child. I think about the people in the parking garage. I think about what I could have done differently. I know, I said. I do too. Does it get easier? I do not know. Ask me in 10 years. She laughed. It was a short, surprised laugh, almost a snort. It was the first time I had heard her laugh in 60 days. 10 years, she said. I like the sound of that. The stars wheeled slowly overhead. The river murmured in the darkness beyond the garden. The night air was cool and smelled like pine trees and clean water, and the green, growing things that had survived the fire. My mother came out and covered us with blankets. My father turned off the porch light so we could see the stars better. Wang Jiujiu fell asleep beside me, her head resting on my shoulder, her breathing slow and even and peaceful. I lay there and watched the stars and thought about the future. There would be work to do. There would be rebuilding to do. There would be grief to carry and guilt to bear and hard questions to answer. The world had changed, and we had changed with it, and there was no going back to the way things were, but we were alive. Against all odds, against all reason, against the full fury of a sun that had refused to set, we were alive, and tomorrow the sun would rise, and it would set, and the day after that it would rise and set again. And we would be here to see it, the two of us, and our families, and whoever else we could save along the way. That was enough. That was more than enough. That was everything.